A man murdered 93 people. He confessed to all of them. The police believed him, and you have never heard his name. He is the most prolific serial killer in American history. Not Bundy, not Dahmer. A man you cannot picture because no one ever told you he existed. He died in a prison cell in 2020, quietly, the way he did everything. You think serial killers get caught. That is the story we are told. The brilliant detective, the single mistake, the killer who secretly wants to be stopped. Forget all of it. The most successful killers in history were not clever. They were not masterminds. Most of them were boring, forgettable men. They got away with it for decades. Some were never caught at all. And they shared one method, not a weapon, not a ritual, a choice. They killed the people no one was looking for. So here is the question that should keep you up tonight. What if the reason you have never heard of them is the exact same reason they were never caught? In 2018, the FBI made a quiet announcement. They had identified the most prolific serial killer the country had ever seen. His name was Samuel Little. For 40 years he drifted across America. He killed women in dozens of cities, and almost no one noticed, because of who he chose. He hunted women living on the edge, the addicted, the homeless, women whose deaths got filed under other words. Overdose, accident, undetermined. A body would turn up. No one came looking. The case went cold before it was ever warm. There is a name for this. Criminologists call it linkage blindness. The failure to connect murders that are obviously connected, because no one is comparing the files. And there is a darker term, the less dead. The victims a society has quietly decided to count a little less. Samuel Little understood that math. He built a 40-year career on it. He was not a genius. He simply chose targets the world had already agreed to ignore. So how did they finally catch him? They didn't. In 2012, he was arrested at a homeless shelter. A minor charge. Routine. His DNA went into a database. It matched 3 unsolved murders from the 80s. 3 women, dead for 30 years, suddenly had a name attached to them. And once they started asking, he could not stop talking. 93 murders. City after city. He remembered their faces. Long after the police had lost their names, he even drew them. Portraits of women, from memory. Women no one had ever reported missing. Now here is the part that should disturb you. He is not rare. In Colombia, a man named Luis Garavito confessed to murdering 138 children. Investigators believe the true number is closer to 300. You have never heard his name. In the same part of the world, another man, Pedro López, confessed to killing 300 young girls. He was released in 1998. He was never seen again. Stop for a second. 300 children. And the man responsible simply walks out of a prison into a crowd and disappears from history. It barely made the news. Why? Look at the pattern. Look at who they chose. Poor children, runaways, street kids, the addicted, the forgotten. Every one of these men used the same weapon. And it was not a knife. It was our attention, the lack of it. But do not think this only happens to the forgotten. The most invisible victims of all were not poor. They were not runaways or strangers. They were ordinary people who simply trusted the wrong man. In the north of England there was a doctor, kind, patient, beloved by his whole town, the sort of man who would sit with you when you were frightened. His name was Harold Shipman, and he murdered at least 250 of his own patients. It made him by some counts the most prolific serial killer in modern history, and he did it in the open, in living rooms, in broad daylight. He would visit them at home, usually elderly, usually alone. He would give them an injection and tell the family it was something to ease the pain. Within minutes, they were gone. Then he signed the death certificate himself, cause of death. Natural. And nobody questioned it. Why would they? An old woman dies quietly in her chair. Her kind, familiar doctor signs the paper. There is no autopsy, no investigation, no suspicion. The case is closed before anyone thinks to ask a single question. Because this is the blind spot. We do not investigate the deaths that feel ordinary. An old person dies, and the world simply nods and looks away. For more than 20 years, that was all it took. He was not caught because someone counted the bodies. For decades no one did. He was caught because he got greedy. He forged a dead patient's will to leave himself her money. But her daughter was a lawyer, and she noticed. That was it. Hundreds of deaths, hidden behind the signature, undone by one clumsy grab for cash. And when they finally looked, the pattern was right there. It had always been there. An ordinary man, killing in plain sight, protected by the one thing none of us ever think to question: trust. And sometimes the system does not just fail to see them. Sometimes it fills the gap with the wrong man. In the Soviet Union, a killer named Mikasevich murdered at least 36 women. While he was doing it, he joined a volunteer police patrol. He helped them search for himself. Other men were arrested for his crimes. One of them was executed. Another lost his sight in a cell during interrogation. The system needed an answer, so it invented one, and the real killer just kept driving home. Now make this personal. You believe that if you disappear tonight, someone would notice. Someone would file a report. Someone would come looking. For most of the victims in this story, that never happened. No report. No search. No name in a headline. They were killed twice. Once by a man, and once by a world that had already decided they did not count. You walk past this every year. Deaths that were never investigated. People quietly filed under accident, because looking closer was inconvenient. These men understood something about us, something we do not like to admit. We do not protect everyone equally. We protect the people we have decided to see. And they built their entire lives inside the space where our attention runs out. So the real question was never how many killers are still out there. It is quieter than that, and worse. How many people have been murdered, and never counted as murdered at all? How many names were filed under accident and closed and forgotten? We measure a killer by his victims, but we only count the victims we were willing to look at. Somewhere, right now, there is a number. The true number. And no one will ever know it. Because the most successful killers were never the clever ones. They were the ones who understood, better than we did, exactly who we were willing to forget. Every man in this video did the same quiet math. Whose disappearance gets a search, and whose gets a shrug, whose death becomes a headline, and whose becomes a paragraph, then a file, then nothing at all. They didn't guess at it, they counted on it. They built entire lives on top of that certainty. And here is the part no one wants to say out loud. So do you. The second you hear that a stranger has died, something in you sorts it, instantly, quietly, tragic or expected. Worth a question, or, well, you know. You didn't choose to do that, but you did it, probably more than once just watching this. That reflex, that tiny automatic ranking of who counts, was never a flaw in the system. It is the system. And it's the reason not one of them was caught in time. They were never hiding from us. They were hiding inside us.